On today's show, the Cleveland Cavaliers and Donovan Mitchell have a contract extension. So where do they go from here? What do the Cavs have to do next? We discuss on today's Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You can get the show anywhere you find your podcast, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Be sure to leave a 5-star review. Leave some notes in the comments as well. Say some nice things about us. That's how you can help us to grow the show. Also, check us out on YouTube. If you're not doing that already, just search Locked On Cavs on YouTube. Find us, watch us. If you're watching the video, give us a thumbs up. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Cavs YouTube channel, your team every day. Today's show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Earlier this week, the Cavs and Donovan Mitchell agreed to a 3-year contract extension worth more than $150 million. That is obviously the biggest thing that the Cavs have done this offseason. It's the biggest thing they could possibly do this offseason. So now that brings up the question, now that that's out of the way, where do the Cavs go from here? And I think that there are 3 things that are important for the Cavs to do the rest of this offseason. We will talk about those 3 things on today's show. Again, I'm Danny Cunningham. You might know me from covering the Cavs at places such as 92.3 The Fan, Cleveland Magazine, and a few other along the way. You can find me on Twitter at RealDCunningham. I want to start with the free agency aspect of things because that is an area where I think a lot of Cavs fans are frustrated because the Cavs, and as I record this, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Wednesday. So by the time this episode comes out, things may have changed a little bit, but as of now, the Cavs have been quiet with the exception of the Donovan Mitchell news. That said, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I think it's great the Cavs have done nothing other than sign their franchise player to a 3-year contract extension. But I also don't think it's the worst thing in the world because a lot of the guys that I think make sense for the Cavs are still on the market as I record this. There's a list of names that I think makes sense that I would be interested in if I'm Kobe Altman, the Cavs president of basketball operations, that I would be interested in adding to this team. Now, there are some names that I thought would have made some sense for the Cavs that are no longer on the board, but guys like Tobias Harris signed for more money than the Cavs were able to offer because of what they have. They were never going to be able to get up to $26 million a year on someone that's really a 3-and-D free agent. That was just not going to be in the cards for them. But as the longer this goes, as the longer the free agency period is drawn out and some of these guys still remained unsigned, I think that's a really good thing for the Cavs because those prices start to come down a little bit. Guys that went into this offseason maybe expecting to get the full mid-level exception, which the Cavs can offer, upwards of $12 million. Those guys now, their price starts to come down a little bit. And that's something that the Cavs can make more competitive offers, I think, to more guys. The first guy I have on my list as someone I think would make sense for the Cavs to go after in free agency that is still available as I record this is Gary Trent Jr. I think he would make a ton of sense in Cleveland. He's someone that has been a really good shooter, shot nearly 40% from 3-point range. He's got the size that the Cavs need as a 3-and-D type of player. He's not the best defender. He can find himself out of position sometimes. He's got good steal numbers, which that's not the be-all, end-all with defenses. I think you guys know if you're watching this that just because you generate a lot of steals doesn't mean you're a great defender because oftentimes you can find yourself gambling for those steals. And if you get them, that's great. But if you don't, you're out of position and that can lead to points for the other team. So while he's not a great defender, I think he'd be a good fit on this roster as someone who can be a low usage type of player, which the Cavs have enough high usage guys, be a low usage type of player that can hit catch and shoot 3-point opportunities. He can be your 7th guy. He can be your 8th guy. He can make that work. I think that'd be a really nice fit for the Cavs. especially if they run it back with the core four. We'll get into that coming up later in the show, but if they run it back with the core four, that's a name that I think makes some sense as someone who probably not going to get the full mid-level exception at this point. Maybe he does. I'd be a little bit surprised, but that is something that I don't think is going to happen for him. And if that's the case, I think that the Cavs should be connected there. I think that the Cavs should be interested in Gary Trent Jr. Another name that has been brought up to me that I think the Cavs should have interest in, but that interest is, it's not a guy that could help right at the start of the season. And that name is Saddiq Bey. I like Saddiq Bey a lot. I do. I think he has some bright days ahead of him as an NBA player, as a specialist, particularly a shooting specialist from the outside. I think he's really good there. I don't have, his exact numbers, but he's also coming off of a torn ACL that he suffered in March. So while I think he'd be an awesome fit, he's the type of player that you don't know if he's going to have any impact at all next season wherever he signs. Now, that's certainly something that I think also probably drives down his price quite a bit. I don't think that, if you would have asked Saddiq Bey in February what he thought he was going to sign for this summer, that number is much different now than it was then, because he had a pretty bad knee injury that's going to cost him to miss most, if not all, of next season. And I understand not all injuries are apples to apples. No two situations are the same. But think back to Ricky Rubio's knee injury, where he missed more than 12 months. Not saying Saddiq Bey's timeline is going to be the same as Rubio was when he was over 30 and it was the second time he tore that ACL. But if Saddiq Bey misses 13 months like Rubio did, you're looking at not getting a guy back until the playoffs begin. And that's not necessarily a place that you want to be. Now, that being said, if this is a deal that's worth 2 or 3 years at the right price for the Cavs, Bey, I think, is someone that, given his track record as a shooter, could be a guy that really helps the Cavs long term. That can be a bargain at a great price, even if it's a 2-year deal and you don't get a ton out of him this year, but you get a lot out of him next year at a really good price. That could be something that the Cavs should be interested in. I like Saddiq Bey a lot. I've liked him since he was coming out of college. He's someone that I think still has some bright days in the NBA ahead of him. Next up on the list, Caleb Martin from Miami. He's still out there. He's still a free agent. I'm a little surprised that he's still available. I'm not crazy about his fit in Cleveland. I don't think he's a great shooter. He does a lot of things really well, but it's kind of the same thing, same conversation we could have had about Max Strus last year, is how much of him being good is because of his situation in Miami and how much is because of who he is as a basketball player. I don't know the answer to that question. I know that Martin has had some flashes of being a good shooter, but overall, he's like a 34% shooter from the outside. And while standing at 6'5", I don't think he's big enough for the Cavs to be interested in if he's just going to be that type of shooter. And even his best year, I believe he shot close to 42% a couple years back, but that was on like 3 attempts a game from outside. So I don't think he's the best fit for the Cavs in terms of what they need. Someone that can help to create more space. And when I'm talking about these guys, I'm doing this with the thought that the core four is going to run it back, and the Cavs need to find someone here that can create space when either one of Jarrett Allen or Evan Mobley is on the floor or both of those guys are on the floor. That's what I'm talking about here when I'm looking at these guys. The other name I have here as someone that could be a shooter that is still available is Malik Beasley. Career 38, almost 39% three-point shooter. And unlike Martin, Beasley takes almost 6 attempts from deep per game. That is something that's very intriguing to me because he is someone that defenses are going to have to respect from the outside. And you can talk about how guys, three-point percentage matters, and it does. You're right. But I think the volume almost matters a little bit more. And we can talk about this with Isaac Okoro, and we will have Isaac Okoro discussion as long as he's still a restricted free agent. And, as of now, there's not been an offer sheet from another team, and the Cavs have obviously not come to terms with him as well as I record this. But it matters to me shooting so many threes a game because Isaac Okoro shot, I think, 38 or 39% from three. But if he's only taking 2.5 3 attempts per game, that's not going to be something that's enough to make defenses respect you. Evan Mobley shot 38% from three, but he took less than 2 of them a game. So he's not going to be defended all that well. 38% from 3 on 2 attempts per game is so much different than 38% or 39% from 3 like Malik Beasley in that neighborhood on 6 attempts per game. They are wildly different. So getting a high volume shooter that's good, even if Beasley's not a great defender, even if he's a little bit undersized, he's a good enough shooter that I think that could be something that really does help the Cavs. So I do think they should have some interest in him in free agency. The last guy I've got, the last one that I want to talk about, is really the buy low candidate of all buy low candidates, and that's Gordon Hayward. Now, Hayward has gone through a lot in his career. Cavs fans know all about that injury he suffered that was at then Quicken Loans Arena, his first game with the Boston Celtics, and Kyrie Irving's first game with the Boston Celtics after the Cavs traded him there the summer of 2017. And Hayward has not been the same player since. He's not a guy, he's not going to be an all-star. Again, that's not what he is. He is certainly on the last legs of his career. But he's someone that should be available for a pretty low price, especially after how poorly his stint went in Oklahoma City. And he could be a good buy low candidate. If he can be 60% of what he was while making something close to the veterans minimum, which I sort of think should be his ballpark right now, that's a pretty good thing for the Cavs. I think that the Cavs should have interest in that type of thing because he plays the exact position that they're missing. He does the things the Cavs need. I don't know that he's ever going to be able to do them at a high enough level, but that's the type of player that could make some sense if the price is right. I'm not advocating to throw your whole mid-level exception at Gordon Hayward. I think that wouldn't be the best idea. But if you can get him on a bargain and let him try and rebuild value to get one more contract on a 1-year deal, I think that'd be a pretty good thing for the Cavs. I think that's another guy they could or should have some interest in. There is a contract I do expect to get done this summer with the Cavs. I'll tell you about it next, right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. And of course, that makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that you get to first pitch, which is a great thing. Everyone wants that. They've got killer last minute deals, all-in prices. I think that's really important. Views from the seat you are going to be sitting in. If you want to buy tickets on Game Time, you can select the seat you want and it'll show you, hey, when you're sitting in these seats, this is what the field's going to look like, or the court, or the rink if you're buying seats to a hockey game. Game Time does that for you, and that's one of the reasons why I love Game Time. And of course, I've said all that, and I haven't even gotten to the lowest price guarantee yet. But Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets to Major League Baseball games. A couple weeks ago, went to a Cleveland Guardians game. They took on the Seattle Mariners. I went on Game Time. I woke up that morning. It was a Thursday. You know what? Guardians play at 1:10 today. I'm going to go to the game. Pull up my Game Time app. I find a great seats for a great price. A great deal all around. I'm able to check out my view, able to see what I'm going to pay without having to worry about extra taxes and fees. What the number says is what I'm paying. So I got there by using Game Time, and you can too. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, download the app first, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the Cavs, as of now, have come to an extension with Donovan Mitchell. We know all about that. I don't think that's going to be the last extension the Cavs get done this summer. I think Evan Mobley and the Cavs are going to come to terms on a contract extension. I'm of the belief that is a priority for the Cavs to get done this summer. And I think that's a really good thing. Yes, it's going to be for a lot of money. It might be for the rookie max. That's okay. I do think that's okay because I firmly believe that Evan Mobley's best days in the NBA are ahead of him. I don't think he's peaked. I think that this coaching change, going from JB Bickerstaff to Kenny Atkinson, is going to be the best thing for Evan Mobley. I think it's going to be one of the best things that ever happens in his career. Because what I think Kenny Atkinson is going to be able to get out of Evan Mobley is going to make him a max level player. And that's before we even talk about how good he is defensively, where he's already that caliber of player. We don't have to dive deep into what he does defensively because we know he's a defensive player of the year candidate. He's always going to be one as long as he meets the threshold for games played. He didn't last year. 2 years ago he did. He would finish third in defensive player of the year voting. He's awesome on that end. He makes 2 or 3 highlight plays every game. That's more than enough to justify what he's going to be paid. But offensively, there's a lot yet for Evan Mobley to unlock. There's still, I don't even think he has scratched the surface of what he can be as an offensive player. A lot of people are going to point to his series against Boston, particularly Game 5, when he was one of the best players on the floor, scored over 30 points, which is fantastic, playing center full-time. If the Cavs run back to core 4, obviously he's not going to play center full-time. That's not going to be the case if they bring Jarrett Allen back. But I do think there are ways, and one of the things that Kenny Atkinson brought up earlier this week in his introductory press conference was he talked about playing with more pace. He talked about being a faster team. And I've talked about this plenty on the podcast over the last month. And one of the issues, one of the things that makes it difficult for the Cavs to play at that pace is the fact that they've got 2 bigs. That can be tough because big guys often not the most athletic, not the fleetest of foot. They can sometimes struggle to get up and down the floor. Well, Atkinson brought up that they've got 2 bigs, but they've got 2 fast bigs. They've got 2 bigs that run the floor pretty well. Jarrett Allen, for his size, does move his feet pretty well, and I think that's been pretty evident in some of the switches that you've seen him out on the perimeter defensively over the past couple of years. I mean, think back. Actually, I believe it was the 71-point game Donovan Mitchell had a couple of years ago against the Chicago Bulls, where the Cavs started putting Jarrett Allen on DeMar DeRozan. It wasn't that they were allowing him to switch out onto DeRozan. They were just saying, hey, go guard this guy. This is your assignment. That speaks to Jarrett Allen's footwork, and that speaks, I do think, a little bit to his ability to get up and down the floor. Not saying the Cavs need to turn into the 7 seconds or less Suns, but if they play faster, I think the guy that's going to benefit the most is Evan Mobley, because I think that's going to get Mobley more opportunities in transition. I think that's going to get Mobley more opportunities with mismatches near the basket. And I also think it's going to give Mobley the opportunity to facilitate the basketball a little bit more. I think that's one of the areas where he is at his best. I think he's been shown to be a very good passer in his first few years in the league, where he can handle the basketball now. I do think that handle needs to get tighter. I think he needs to become a better ball handler this summer. That should be one of the priorities for him, in addition to, of course, continuing to work on that jump shot, to add some strength, maybe add a little bit of weight to his frame, make himself a better all-around basketball player. But if he improves that handle, I think that the transition game for the Cavs is going to improve quite a bit with Evan. I think that he's someone that he can pick up probably 6 to 8 points per game just by running more on the open floor. And that takes him from being, a 16 point per game scorer to a 24 point per game scorer, 22 points per game. When that is your second or third offensive option, which he would be, that's fantastic. It's difficult to think of how many third options there are that are able to score that much. And the thing with him, he's always going to be very efficient scoring wise. Like, his attempts numbers never going to be super high. It's just not, because he's not a ball dominant player. He's never going to be, I don't think, higher than third on the Cavs in field goal attempts. That's why I do think, to judge how good he is offensively, you have to look a little bit past just the scoring numbers. But I do think a way to boost that, a very easy way to boost that, is by pushing the pace. So if those things happen, you're talking about, what does Evan Mobley look like then? And I think Mobley does look like a guy that deserves to have the rookie max. I do have some questions about the contract, and I believe this is something the Cavs are working on. But I wonder if he gets the full max. I wonder if the Cavs feel as if he has done enough to earn the full rookie max scale contract extension. That'll be a very interesting thing to find out. The other thing that I'm fascinated to see about this contract is, does he get a player option? Is that last year going to be a player option? It's not something the Cavs love to do. They just gave Donovan Mitchell one, though. But if you look at some of the contracts they've handed out, particularly the extensions they've handed out, they've not been too eager to give those out. Darius Garland doesn't have a player option on his deal. Jared Allen does not have a player option on his deal. They signed Lauri Markkanen into the contract he's currently on with Utah Jazz. I do not believe that has a player option attached to it at the end. They have done a really good job of saying, when you sign a contract with us, you're signing a contract. You're not getting out of this early. I do think Donovan Mitchell is a different exception. And I'm of the belief that player options should be for the best players. You know, we're at the point now where we see some guys that just are not deserving of player options getting player options. And the Cavs have been very picky about who they give those player options to. I don't know if Evan Mobley is in that boat. I suspect the Cavs are going to be doing everything they can to ensure that Evan Mobley is on a full, if he gets that full max, I don't know that the Cavs are going to want to put a player option on that final year. I'm going to bet that they want to make it a 5-year full max. It is a true 5-year commitment, not a 4-year commitment with a player option at the end of it to protect the player. That's how the Cavs do business. I would suspect that's what they want to do here. Whether or not that gets done, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure if that's going to be part of the Cavs, part of their contract with Evan Mobley. But I do think that this summer, and I think it's one of the things that happens next, is we see the Cavs, we see Evan Mobley come to terms on a contract extension that's going to keep Mobley in Cleveland for quite a while. Up next, I've got one more thing that I think makes sense for the Cavs to look to next now that they've got Donovan Mitchell agreed upon, not signed yet. He cannot sign the deal until this weekend, but that they have agreed to a contract extension with Donovan Mitchell. I think a trade, maybe it's in their future, maybe it's not, but I think conversation about it should be one of the next steps for the Cavs. I'll tell you what it is next right here on Locked On Cavs. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume because of all the shouting that goes on? Well, I'm here to tell you to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's programmed for you every day, and it brings you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Cavs have been pretty adamant about running it back with the core four. That core four, Donovan Mitchell, just signed a contract extension, or will be signing a contract extension, but just agreed to one with the Cavaliers. Evan Mobley, I believe, will come to terms on a contract extension with the Cavaliers at some point this summer. Darius Garland, there's been some noise about him maybe wanting out of Cleveland. That noise, for the most part, has died down. I'm not so sure Darius Garland's going to get traded. I'm not so sure Darius Garland wants to get traded this summer. I am of the belief that he'd like to be in Cleveland, that he would like to continue to be a member of the Cavaliers. And then fourth, Jarrett Allen. We've not heard a ton about how Jarrett Allen feels. He has seemed to enjoy his time in Cleveland from the little that I know. But I think he's the guy that if they want to move somebody, it makes the most sense to move. So now that they've got Donovan Mitchell locked up, is it time to explore that sort of trade? Because if you believe that the Cavaliers can be championship contenders with the core four, then you don't worry about this. You don't have to worry about making this sort of deal. It doesn't make sense because you believe that the internal growth that they can have from Evan Mobley, that they can have from Darius Garland, that they can have from Donovan Mitchell is even, he continues to be on the rise as a basketball player. He keeps getting better. If you think all of that can lead to a championship, then you don't have to worry about trading Jarrett Allen. You don't have to worry about repurposing any of the assets to try and improve the depth on the wing for the Cavs. That's okay. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. But if you feel otherwise, I think now is the time to start to think about trading Jarrett Allen. Looking into what some of those trades could look like. Brandon Ingram is a name that I keep going back to because Brandon Ingram in the trade machine works for Jarrett Allen and Karis LeVert. And if you could get away with extending Brandon Ingram for less than the max, and you don't have to give him $50+ million a year to have him on your roster, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I understand that there are a lot of people that don't want to trade Jarrett, and I get it. I'm not saying I want to trade Jarrett. But look at it this way. The Cavs are in a position where right now, I trust Donovan Mitchell when I need him to go score me 30 points in a game. I trust him to be able to do it. I don't trust anyone else on the roster to consistently do that. And I'm not saying that I trust Brandon Ingram to do that, because I don't. He's been a relatively inconsistent basketball player in this situation he's currently in New Orleans. But with that said, can Brandon Ingram go out and get me 25 in game 4 of a playoff series? Yeah. Who do I think is more likely to go score 25 points a game as a second option in a playoff series to Donovan Mitchell? Brandon Ingram or Darius Garland? Brandon Ingram or Evan Mobley? Brandon Ingram or Jared Allen? I think the answer to all three of those is Brandon Ingram. Now, the low points are going to be there, but he is someone that is sort of, I view as a buy low candidate. And yeah, giving up Jared Allen is a lot. Maybe the Cavs will get a little bit more than just Brandon Ingram back in that trade. But I think it's one that they should be looking at. I think that's a deal that makes sense for the Cavs if you want to move on. If you don't want to move on, if you want to run it back, if you want to see what Kenny Atkinson can do, how things can look differently just by having Kenny Atkinson on the bench instead of JB Bickerstaff, by all means, do it. If the Cavs really believe that, okay, let's see what it looks like. I'm willing to give it a chance. But I also am willing to say, okay, if they want to reshuffle things, what makes sense? And I think this is something that could make sense. I've bounced back and forth on wanting the Cavs to trade for Brandon Ingram. I'm still not sure where I stand, but I see both sides of how it could make sense for everybody. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Doing a mailbag episode tomorrow. Get your questions in, drop them in the comments right here, or you can tweet them at @RealZCunningham. A week of free agency is gone. Donovan Mitchell going to be in Cleveland for quite a while. I want to talk about all of it. I want to know what you guys want to talk about. So drop your questions again. RealZCunningham on Twitter, Locked On Cavs on Twitter, or comment them below this video. If you're watching the video, comment and give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Cavs YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify. If you like Apple better than Spotify, subscribe on Apple. But do me a favor, download Spotify. Subscribe on Spotify too. If you're a Spotify person and you've got an iPhone, download it on Spotify. Make sure you're subscribed on Apple Podcasts as well. That's how you can help to grow the show. There's been a lot of growth with this show over the past month. Cannot wait to continue to grow it. Thank you all for being a part of it. I will talk to you. Mailbag episode tomorrow. Cannot wait for that. Get your questions in and we will have a bunch of fun. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day.